Hans Landa does not look like a monster, and that is exactly why he is so terrifying. He is not dirty, chaotic, or visibly cruel. He is clean, cultured, gentlemanly, almost charming. But behind that charm is a man who can hunt human beings with the patience of a detective and the joy of an artist. So the question is not whether Hans Landa is evil. That part is obvious. The real question is much more disturbing. What kind of evil smiles this much? Because Hans Landa does not enter Inglourious Basterds like a man consumed by rage. He enters like a professional. He asks permission. He compliments. He sits politely. He drinks milk. He speaks with warmth, patience, and perfect control. And then, with the same calmness, he turns a farmhouse into a death chamber. This is the humanity within Hans Landa. Not goodness, not remorse, not some hidden innocence buried beneath the uniform. His humanity is something colder. Intelligence, manners, curiosity, careerism, professional pride. The ability to understand people deeply without caring about them at all. That is what makes him so disturbing. Landa is not frightening only because he wears the uniform of evil. He is frightening because he makes evil look civilized. He does not need to scream hatred. He does not need to foam with ideology. He does not need to look possessed. He can commit horror while behaving like a dinner guest. And that brings us to one of the central questions of his character. What if Landa is so frightening? Because he does not need hatred to commit evil. Hatred would almost make him easier to understand. If he were just a fanatic, his cruelty would have a familiar shape. But Hans Landa is something stranger. He seems less like a believer and more like a man who has found the perfect stage for his talents. A detective, a performer, a negotiator, a predator. The Nazi system gives him authority, victims, protection, and a title. And Landa uses all of it with terrifying efficiency. Not because the ideology owns him, but because the ideology serves him. That is the first clue to understanding him. Hans Landa is not just a symbol of evil. He is a man who turns evil into a career. And perhaps the most disturbing part is this. Landa does not seem to think he is committing evil. Not because he is innocent, not because he is misunderstood, and not because his actions can be softened or excused. They cannot, but because inside his own mind, he has moved beyond the language of good and evil. He does not appear to ask, "Is this right?" He asks, "Am I good at it?" And that difference is horrifying, because when a man knows he is doing evil, there is at least some recognition that a moral boundary exists. But Landa behaves as if guilt is irrelevant, as if morality is something ordinary people worry about when they are not talented enough to win. To him, hunting people is not a moral crisis. It is a craft, a skill, a profession, a way to demonstrate superiority. That is why the title Jew Hunter does not initially shame him. It flatters him. He treats the name not as a mark of barbarism, but as proof of excellence. A reputation earned, a distinction achieved, a professional identity. This is where his evil becomes especially cold. Because Landa does not need to see himself as cruel. He can see himself as effective. He does not need to see himself as monstrous. He can see himself as intelligent. He does not need to see genocide as genocide. He can reduce it to investigation, procedure, paperwork, and results. And once evil becomes procedure, almost anything can be done with a polite voice. That is what makes his first scene so powerful. Before the guns fire, before the floorboards are torn apart, before Shosanna runs through the field, Landa has already taken control of the room. He arrives at Perrier Lapidita's farmhouse with soldiers behind him. But the soldiers are not his most dangerous weapon. His real weapon is conversation. He enters with perfect manners. He greets the family. He observes the daughters. He drinks the milk. He smiles. He speaks softly. Nothing about him is openly savage. And yet the entire room begins to tighten around him. This is Landa's genius. He can make politeness feel like pressure. He can make silence feel like accusation. He can make a normal conversation feel like a trap, slowly closing. He does not need to shout at Lapidite. He does not need to threaten his daughters directly. He simply lets everyone understand what his presence means. The uniform speaks. The soldiers speak. The pauses speak. His eyes speak. And because he never says the threat out loud, the fear becomes stronger. Lapidite knows something terrible is happening. but Landa forces him to participate in the politeness of it. He must sit, he must answer, he must maintain the manners of a host while the man across from him slowly takes his home apart. That is why Hans Landa is not merely a villain in a uniform. He is a warning that evil does not always arrive looking like evil. Sometimes it arrives well dressed. Sometimes it arrives smiling. Sometimes it says please. Sometimes it says thank you. Sometimes it believes it is only doing its job. But Landa is not just a polite officer with a talent for intimidation. He is something more specific, something almost mythic. He is what Sherlock Holmes might become if brilliance lost its conscience. And in the farmhouse, we are about to see exactly what that means. Sherlock Holmes uses brilliance to uncover crime. Hans Landa uses brilliance to complete it. That is the difference. And that is why the farmhouse scene becomes more than just an interrogation. It becomes the birth of a horrifying idea. Hans Landa is the evil twin of Sherlock Holmes, a detective without justice, a genius without conscience, a man who does not use observation to save the innocent, but to corner them. In another story, his intelligence might have made him heroic. The attention to detail, the control of language, the ability to read a room, the patience to wait until a suspect breaks, the talent for seeing what everyone else misses. These are the qualities we normally admire in a detective. But in Landa, those qualities are corrupted. His mind is sharp, but it is pointed in the wrong direction. He does not solve mysteries to restore moral order. He solves them to serve power. That is why his pipe matters. On the surface, it almost feels comical. The oversized pipe, the theatrical gesture, the detective posing like he has stepped out of a Sherlock Holmes fantasy. But the comedy makes the horror sharper. Because Landa is not just smoking. He is announcing his superiority. He is saying, without saying it, I have solved you. He already knows the Dreyfus family is under the floorboards. He already knows Lapadite is lying. He already knows the farmhouse has become a hiding place. So why continue? Why ask questions? Why drink milk? Why talk about rats and hawks? Why extend the scene when the answer is already beneath his boots? Because the answer is not enough for Landa. He wants the performance. He wants Lapadite to feel the walls closing in. He wants the truth to rise slowly, painfully through the conversation. He wants the victim to participate in his own defeat. This is what makes Landa different from a common executioner. The killing is not the only point. The unveiling is the point. The proof is the point. The moment where the other person realizes they have been beaten before the game even began. And that brings us to one of the most disturbing questions in the farmhouse. When Landa sits there smiling, drinking milk, and asking questions, is he conducting an interrogation or performing a role he enjoys too much? Because everything he does is controlled. The switch from French to English is not a convenience. It is a blade hidden inside politeness. The family beneath the floorboards cannot understand English. So Landa creates a private world above them, a world where their lives can be discussed without their awareness. Language becomes a locked door. Lapadite is trapped inside the truth. The Dreyfus family is trapped outside it, and Landa controls both sides. That is his genius. He does not just dominate people physically, he dominates the conditions under which truth can appear. He decides who speaks, who understands, who waits, who fears, who dies. The rat and hawk speech reveals this even more clearly. Landa does not sound like a man blinded by rage. He sounds like a man explaining a theory. He analyzes hiding. He analyzes survival. He analyzes instinct. And that is what makes the speech so cold. He understands why people run. He understands why people hide. He understands why a family would choose the floorboards over death. But understanding does not lead him to mercy. It leads him to efficiency. That is the abyss inside Landa. He understands human fear well enough to weaponize it. He sees humanity clearly, and then uses that clarity against it. This is why calling him the evil Sherlock Holmes matters, because Sherlock notices the small detail that reveals the crime. Landa notices the small detail that reveals the victim. A hesitation, a glance, a breath, a badly chosen word, a body held too still. A person trying too hard to appear calm. To Landa, fear is evidence, and that same instinct returns later when he sits across from Shosanna. Now the farmhouse has become a restaurant. The guns are gone, the soldiers are gone, the floorboards are gone, but the trap is still there. Only this time it is disguised as dessert. He orders milk, he orders strudel. He insists on the cream. He speaks politely, he smiles, and Shosanna sits across from the man who murdered her family, forced to pretend she's only a cinema owner having a formal conversation. This scene is terrifying because of one question. Does Hans Landa recognize her? If he does, then every gesture is torture. The milk becomes a reminder of the dairy farm. The strudel becomes a ritual of domination. The small talk becomes a game. He is not simply speaking to her. He is pressing his finger into the deepest wound of her life and waiting to see if she bleeds. But if he does not recognize her, the scene may be even more disturbing. Because then Landa is torturing her without even knowing the full reason. His instincts are so precise that he can feel fear in the air. He can sense pressure. He can sense a person hiding something. He may not know the name Shosanna Dreyfus, but he knows the body in front of him is not at peace. And for Landa, that is enough, because he does not need certainty to begin the hunt. He only needs discomfort. He only needs tension. He only needs the possibility that someone is performing. That is why politeness is not the opposite of violence in Landa's world. Politeness is his favorite form of it. A question can be a knife, a smile can be a cage, a dessert can become an interrogation room. He never needs to say, "I know who you are." The horror is that he might, and Shosanna has to survive inside that uncertainty. That is what Landa does to people. He makes them act normal while their inner world is collapsing. He turns social manners into psychological torture. He forces terror to wear a polite face. And this is where his detective work becomes almost supernatural. At the tavern massacre, even when Landa is not present, his shadow arrives through investigation. He studies bodies. He notices details. He reconstructs what happened. He follows the trail like a man reading a story everyone else left unfinished. Again, the Sherlock image returns. But this is not justice approaching. This is the hunter picking up the scent, and the trail leads to Bridget von Hammersmark, a woman who thinks she can perform too. An actress, a spy, a liar, someone who believes she can survive by playing a role. But Landa has spent the entire film studying performances. He knows when a person is acting. He knows when a room contains a secret. He knows when a lie is trying to stand on broken legs. And Bridget makes one fatal mistake. She does not just betray Germany. She insults Landa's intelligence. Her lie is too weak, too careless, too beneath the game he believes he is playing. And that is when the gentleman begins to disappear. Because even the perfect performer has one weakness: vanity. And when Bridget von Hammersmark wounds that vanity, we finally see what has been hiding beneath the manners. And when Bridget von Hammersmark finally sits across from Landa, the game changes. Until now, Landa's violence has mostly been hidden behind manners. A smile, a question, a glass of milk, a carefully staged conversation. But Bridget exposes something else, not because she defeats him, but because she insults him. She is an actress, a spy, a performer, and in theory, she should understand masks as well as he does. But her lie is weak, too careless, too obvious. A mountain climbing accident, a broken leg, a story that cannot survive the evidence. And for Landa, this is not just a failed deception. It is an insult to the game, because Landa does not only enjoy catching people, he enjoys the elegance of the hunt. He likes the tension, the theater, the slow collapse of the person across from him. But Bridget gives him something sloppy, something beneath his intelligence. And that is why this moment matters. For the first time, the gentleman truly disappears. No polite distance, no soft interrogation, no theatrical patience. He attacks her with his own hands. The civilized detective becomes a brute. And this raises another question. Why does the man who can order murder so calmly suddenly become physical? Because Bridget does not just betray the Reich. She wounds his vanity. She reveals that beneath the manners, beneath the intelligence, beneath the perfect control, there is still a man who cannot tolerate being treated like a fool. That is the crack in Landa's mask. Not guilt, not remorse, vanity. And once we understand that, his final decision becomes even more revealing. When the war turns, Landa does not collapse. He adapts. He does not die for Germany. He does not sacrifice himself for Hitler. He does not cling to the cause like a true believer. He negotiates, because for Hans Landa, The uniform was never sacred. It was useful. The title was useful. The authority was useful. The victims were useful. The entire machine of the Reich was useful because it gave his talents a stage. But once that stage begins to burn, Landa simply looks for another one. That is the final horror of him. He can abandon the ideology without abandoning the evil it allowed him to enjoy. He does not say, "I was wrong." He says, "Let's make a deal." He wants immunity, comfort, status, a future, a house in Nantucket, a new identity. He wants to remove the uniform as if it were just a costume from a role he has finished playing. And maybe in his mind, that is exactly what it was. A role, a job, a chapter, a useful mask. That is why Landa is more than a Nazi villain. He's a chameleon. He becomes whatever the room rewards. When Germany rewards cruelty, he becomes the Jew hunter. When the Allies reward betrayal, he becomes helpful. When survival requires charm, he becomes charming. When history is about to judge him, he tries to rewrite his part in it. But Aldo Rain understands something Landa does not. Some things cannot be negotiated away. Not with language, not with manners, not with intelligence, not with a deal. Landa believes identity is flexible. Aldo makes it permanent. He carves the swastika into Landa's forehead. And in that moment, Landa loses the one power he has relied on the entire film. The power to change masks. He can no longer walk into a room and decide who he wants to be. He can no longer become only a gentleman, only a detective, only a survivor, only a man who was doing his job. His face now tells the truth. His words were trying to escape. The uniform is no longer something he can take off. It has become skin. That is the punishment, not death, recognition, for a man who spent the whole story controlling how others saw him. The final defeat is being seen forever. And that brings us back to the humanity within Hans Landa. It is not compassion. It is not conscience. It is not some buried goodness. It is something much more disturbing. The human ability to adapt without morality, to use intelligence without mercy, to turn politeness into violence, to treat evil as work, and then expect to clock out when the job becomes inconvenient. Hans Landa does not look like a monster. That is what makes him terrifying. Because he reminds us that evil does not always arrive with hatred in its eyes. Sometimes it arrives with manners, sometimes it arrives with charm. Sometimes it arrives with perfect grammar, a warm smile, and a glass of milk. Before you leave, answer this in the comments. Do you think Hans Landa recognized Shosanna in the restaurant scene? And after that, tell me which character you want me to analyze next. If you want more explorations of villains, monsters, and broken human beings, subscribe to Moral Abyss. Because here, we do not just look at villains, we look at the human abyss underneath them.